The victory Stela of King Piye. From Ancient Egyptian Literature, the Late Period. Translated by Miriam Lichtim. This audio presentation is read and voiced by Shakimra. It is provided to the public by Amen-Ra University. The great victory Stela of King Piye, on which the king narrates his conquest of all of Kemet, is the foremost historical inscription of the late period. It equals the New Kingdom annals of Thutmose III in factualness and surpasses them in vividness. It also paints the portrait of a Nubian king who was forceful, shrewd, and generous. He meant to rule Kemet, but he preferred treaties to warfare, and when he fought, he did not glory in the slaughter of his adversaries in the manner of an Assyrian king. Like all members of his Egyptianized dynasty, he was extremely pious and especially devoted to Amen, whom he worshipped in his Nubian residence, Napata, and of course in the god's own hallowed city, Thebes. Nubian rule over Kemet lasted less than 100 years and was succeeded by the rule of the vigorous Egyptian dynasty hailing from Sais, the 26th dynasty, which rebuilt a strongly centralized and prosperous state. Relations with Nubia were at first peaceful, but in 592 BC, Psamtik II attacked Nubia and claimed a victory. A reconquest of northern Nubia by Kemet was out of the question, and just what prompted the king to attack is not known. In any event, the campaign recorded on the victory Stela of King Psamtik II may be viewed as an act of revenge. The Necrotis Stela of King Nectanebo I is a monument to the prosperous reign of the 30th dynasty, the last native dynasty of Kemet. Nectanebo I built extensively, and the quality of his monuments is high. Erected in the temple of the goddess Neith, in the predominantly Greek town of Necrotis, the stela bears witness to the material wealth contributed by the Greeks in their capacity as traders and manufacturers. The victory stela of King Piye. Cairo Museum 48862. The large round-top stela of gray granite was discovered in 1862 in the ruins of the Temple of Amen at Napata, the Nubian capital at the foot of Gebel Barkal. The Temple of Amen, erected in the New Kingdom, had been much enlarged by Piye. The stela measures 1.8 by 1.84 meters, and the sides are 0.43 meters thick. It is inscribed on all four sides with a total of 159 lines. The relief in the lunette shows on the left Amen enthroned, with Mut standing behind him and King Piye before him. Beyond Piye, King Namart of Hermopolis leads up a horse. With him is his wife, whose right arm is raised in a gesture of prayer. In the register below are the prostrate figures of kings Asorkin IV, Euput II, and Heftuah Bast. Behind them, also kissing the ground, are 5 rulers, the prince, Pidies, and the 4 chiefs of the Libyan Meshwesh, Pagenfi, Pemai, Akanos, and Jedamenef Ankh. The words inscribed before these subjected rulers are mostly destroyed. Piye, the king of Nubia, was in control of Upper Kemet with an army of his stationed there. While at Napata, the news reached him that Tefnakat of Sais, the great chief of the Ma, who ruled the entire western delta, was extending his conquest southward. including King Namart of Hermopolis, and had turned south to besiege Heracleopolis, whose ruler, Pharaoh, was allied with Piye. Piye first decided to send reinforcements to his army in Egypt, and when this army failed to win decisive victories, he himself led another army into Kemet. In the 20th year of his reign, circa 734 BC, Piye sailed to Kemet. After halting at Thebes to celebrate the Opet festival of Amen, he tightened the siege of Hermopolis until King Namart surrendered. He then rescued the besieged Pharaoh at Heracleopolis and received his homage. Thereafter, he proceeded to capture the strongholds that stood between him and Memphis. The great walled city of Memphis, which refused to surrender, was stormed in heavy fighting. Then, the rulers of the Delta hastened to surrender. Only Tefnakhat of Sais still held out. Eventually, Tefnakhat admitted defeat and, treating through an envoy, made his submission. Loaded with booty, a triumphant Piye sailed home to Napata. The direct factual style of the inscription makes it a historical document of the First Order. It is also the most important in a series of royal inscriptions of the Nubian 25th dynasty. In the latest discussion of the name, G. Wittmann proposed that, whereas the Nubian form was Pi or Piye, the Egyptians understood it as Pi-Anki. Thus, some scholars now write Pi-Anki. I have, after some hesitation, chose Piye. Year 21, first month of the season, under the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Kemet, Piye, beloved of Amen, ever living, command spoken by my majesty. Hear what I did, exceeding the ancestors, I the king, image of God, living likeness of Atum, who left the womb marked as ruler, feared by those greater than he. His father knew, his mother perceived. He will be ruler from the egg. The good God, beloved of gods, the son of Ra, who acts with his arms, Piye, beloved of Amen. One came to say to his majesty, the chief of the West, the count and grandee in Niger, Tefnakhat, is in the Nome, in the Nam of Kois, in Hapi, in Pernub, and in the Nome of Memphis. He has conquered the entire West, from the coastal marshes to Etej Dawi, sailing south with a numerous army, with the two lands united behind him, and the counts and rulers of domain are as dogs at his feet. No stronghold has closed its gates in the nomes of Upper Kemet, Mer Atum, Per Shakim Kepera, Hut Sabek, Per Mejed, Jex Nesh. All towns of the west have opened the gates for fear of him. When he turned around to the nomes of the east, they opened to him also. Hut Benu, Tiljwa, Hut Nesut, Per Nebtipe. Now he is besieging Henes. He has encircled it completely, not letting goers go, not letting entrants enter, and fighting every day. He has measured it in its whole circuit. Every count knows its wall. He has made every man besiege his portion, to wit the counts and rulers of domains. His majesty heard it with delight, laughing joyously. Then those chiefs, the counts, and the generals who were in their towns sent to his majesty daily, saying, have you been silent in order to forget the south land, the nomes of Upper Kemet, while Tefnakhat conquers all before him and finds no resistance? Namart, ruler of Polis, count of Hutraret, has demolished the wall of Nephrusi. He has thrown down his own town out of fear of him who would seize it for himself in order to besiege another town. Now he has gone to be at his feet. He has rejected the water of his majesty. He stays with them like one of his men in the nome of Oxyrhynchos. He, Tefnakat, gives him his gifts. His Majesty wrote to the counts and generals who were in Kemet, the commander Perem, and the commander Lemesnekni, and every commander of His Majesty who was in Kemet. Enter combat, engage in battle, surround the city, capture its people, its cattle, its ships on the river. Let not the farmers go to the field, let not the plowmen plow. Beset the Haran Nome, fight against it daily. Then they did exactly so. Then His Majesty sent an army to Kemet and charged them strictly. Do not attack by night in the manner of Drought's playing. Fight when one can see. Challenge him to battle from afar. If he proposes to await the infantry and territory of another town, then sit still until his troops come. Fight when he proposes. Also, if he has allies in another town, let them be awaited. The counts whom he brings to help him, and any trusted Libyan troops, let them be challenged to battle in advance, saying, You, whose name we do not know, who musters the troops, harness the best steeds of your stable, form your battle line, and know that Atum, Amen, is the God who sent us. When you have reached Thebes at Epet-Sut, go into the water, cleanse yourselves in the river, wear the best linen, rest the bow, loosen the arrow, boast not to the Lord of might, for the brave has no might without him. He makes the weak-armed strong-armed, so that the many flee before the few, and a single one conquers 1,000 men. Sprinkle yourselves with water of his altars, kiss the earth before his face. Say to him, Give us the way. May we fight in the shade of your arm, the troop you sent when it charges. May the many tremble before it. It is your valor that gives us strength. There is dread when your name is recalled. No army wins with a cowardly leader. Who is your equal there? You are the mighty king who acts with his arms, the chief of the work of war. They sailed north and arrived at Thebes. They did as His Majesty had said. Sailing north on the river, they met many ships going south with soldiers and sailors, all kinds of fighting troops from Lower Kemet, equipped with weapons of warfare, to fight against His Majesty's army. Then a great slaughter was made of them, whose number is unknown. Their troops and ships were captured and taken as prisoners to where His Majesty was. They proceeded toward Hennes and challenged to battle. List of the counts and kings of Lower Kemet. King Namart and King Ilput, chief of the Ma, Sheshank of Per User Nebjedu, and Greek chief of the Ma'ah, Jed Amen F-Unk of Per Baneb Jejet, and his eldest son, the commander of Per Thoth Wepreri, the troops of Prince Baken Nephi, and his eldest son, the count and the chief of Ma'ah, Nes Naisu of Hezbu, every plume-wearing chief of Lower Kemet, and King Osirkan of Perbast and the district of Ra-Nefer. All the counts, all the rulers of domains in the west, in the east, and in the isles of the mist were united in their allegiance to the feet of the great chief of the west, the ruler of the domains of Lower Kemet, the prophet of Neith. Mistress of Sais, the Sejim priest of Ptah, Tefneket. They went forth against them. They made a great slaughter of them, exceedingly great. Their ships on the river were captured. The remnant made a crossing and landed on the west side in the vicinity of Perpeg. At dawn of the next day, the troops of His Majesty crossed over against them, and troops mingled with troops. They slew many of their men and countless horses. Terror befell the remnant, and they fled to Lower Kemet from the blow that was great and exceedingly painful. King Namart fled upstream, southward when he was told. Khnum's faced with war from the troops of His Majesty. Its people and its cattle are being captured. He entered into while His Majesty's army was on the river and on the riverbanks of the Hare Nom. They herded and surrounded the Hare Nom on its four sides, not letting goers go, not letting entrants enter. They wrote to report to the Majesty of the King of Upper and Lower Kemet, Piye, beloved of Amen, given life, on every attack they had made, on every victory of His Majesty. His Majesty raged about like a panther. Have they left a remnant of the army of Lower Kemet so as to let some of them escape to report the campaign, instead of killing and destroying the last of them? I swear, as Ra loves me, as my father Amen favors me, I shall go north myself. I shall tear down his work. I shall make him abandon fighting forever. When the rites of New Year are performed and I offer to my father Amen at his beautiful feast, when he makes his beautiful appearance of the New Year, he shall send me in peace to view Amen at his beautiful feast of Ipet. I shall convey him in his processional bark to southern Ipet at his beautiful feast of the night of Ipet, and the feast of abiding in Thebes, which Ra made for him in the beginning. They fought against Permejed. They captured it like a cloudburst. They wrote to His Majesty. His heart was not appeased by it. Then they fought against the crag, great of victories. They found it, filled with troops, all kinds of fighters of Lower Kemet. A siege tower was made against it. Its wall was overthrown. A great slaughter was made of them, countless numbers, including a son of the chief of the Ma Tefnakat. They wrote of it to His Majesty. His heart was not appeased by it. Then they fought against Hutbenu. Its interior was opened. His Majesty's troops entered it. They wrote to His Majesty. His heart was not appeased by it. First month of the first season, day 9, His Majesty went north to Thebes. He performed the feast of Amen at the feast of Ipet. His Majesty sailed north to the harbor of the Hare Nom. His Majesty came out of the cabin of the ship. The horses were yoked. The chariot was mounted, while the grandeur of His Majesty attained the Asiatics, and every heart trembled before him. His Majesty burst out to revile his troops, raging at them like a panther. Are you continuing to fight while delaying my orders? It is the year for making an end, for putting fear of me in Lower Egypt, and inflicting on them a great and severe beating. He set up camp on the southwest of Khnum. He pressed against it every day. An embankment was made to enclose the wall. A siege tower was set up to elevate the archers as they shot, and the slingers as they hurled stones and killed people there each day. Days passed, and was a stench to the nose for lack of air to breathe. Then threw itself on its belly to plead before the king. Messengers came and went with all kinds of things beautiful to behold: gold, precious stones, clothes in a chest, the diadem from his head, the uraeus that cast his power, without ceasing for many days to implore his crown. Then they sent his wife, the royal wife and royal daughter Nestenet, to implore the royal wives, the royal concubines, the royal daughters. She threw herself on her belly in the women's house before the royal women. Lo, who guides you? Who guides you? Who then guides you? You have abandoned the way of life. Was it the case that heaven rained arrows? I was content that southerners bowed down and northerners said, place us in your shade. Was it bad that I was showered with gifts? The heart is the rudder. It capsizes its owner through that which comes from the wrath of God. It sees fires as coolness. He is not grown old who is seen with his father. Your gnomes are full of children. He threw himself on his belly before his majesty, saying, Be appeased, Horus, lord of the palace. It is your power that has done it to me. I am one of the king's servants who pays taxes into the treasury. I have done for you more than they. Then he presented silver, gold, lapis lazuli, turquoise, copper, and all kinds of precious stones. The treasury was filled with his tribute. He brought a horse with his right hand, and in his left hand a sistrum of gold and lapis lazuli. His Majesty arose in splendor from his palace and proceeded to the temple of Thoth, lord of Kemet. He sacrificed oxen, shorthorns, and fowl to his father Thoth, lord of Kemet, and the Ogdod, in the temple of the Ogdod. And the troops of the Hare gnomes shouted and sang, saying, How good is Horus at peace in his town, the son of Ra, Piye. You make for us a jubilee as you protect the Hare gnome. His Majesty proceeded to the house of King Namart. He went through all the rooms of the palace, his treasury, and his storehouse. He, Namart, presented the royal wives and royal daughters to him. They saluted his Majesty in the manner of women, while his Majesty did not direct his gaze at them. His Majesty proceeded to the stable of the horses and the quarters of the fowls. When he saw they had been left to hunger, he said, I swear, as Ra loves me, as my nose is refreshed by life, that my horses were made to hunger pains me more than any other crime you committed in your recklessness. I would teach you to respect your neighbors. Do you not know God's shade is above me and does not let my action fail? Would that another, whoever he might be, had done it for me. I would not have to reprimand him for it. I was fashioned in the womb, created in the egg of the God. The seed of the God is in me. By his Ka, I act not without him. It is he who commands me to act. Then his goods were assigned to the treasury, and his granary to the endowment of Amen and Epet-Sut. There came the ruler of Hanes Pep-Tuaubast, bearing tribute to Pharaoh, gold, silver, all kinds of precious stones, and the best horses of the stable. He threw himself on his belly before his Majesty and said, Hail to you, Horus, mighty king, bull attacking bulls. The netherworld seized me. I foundered in darkness. O you who give me the rays of his face, I could find no friend on the day of distress, who would stand up on battle day except you, O mighty King. You drove the darkness from me. I shall serve with my property. Henes owes to you your dwelling. You are Herukahudi above the immortal stars. As he is king, so are you. As he is immortal, you are immortal. King of Upper and Lower Egypt, Piye, ever living. His Majesty sailed north to the entrance of the canal beside Rahone and found Pershakim Keperah with its wall raised, its gate closed and filled with all kinds of fighters of Lower Kemet. Then his Majesty sent to them, saying, O you who live in death, you who live in death, you poor wretches, you who live in death, if the moment passes without your opening to me, you will be counted slain according to the king's judgment. Do not bar the gates of your life so as to be brought to the block this day. Do not desire death and reject life. Lo, God's shade is above you. Nut's son gave you his arms. Your heart's plan happens instantly, like the word of the mouth of God. Truly you are born of God, for we see it by the work of your arms. Lo, your town and its gates. May entrants enter, goers go. May his Majesty do as he wishes. They came out with the son of the chief of the Ma Tebnakat. The troops of his Majesty entered it, and he did not slay one of all the people he found. In order to seal its possessions, its treasuries were allocated to the treasury, its granaries as endowment to his father Amin-Ra, Lord of the thrones of the two lands. His Majesty sailed north to Itezdawi. He found the rampart closed, the walls filled with valiant troops of Lower Kemet. Then they opened the gates and threw themselves on their bellies before his Majesty, saying to his Majesty, Your father gave you his heritage. Yours are the two lands. Yours, those in it. Yours is all that is on earth. His Majesty went to offer a great sacrifice to the gods of this town, oxen, shorthorns, fowl, and everything good and pure. Its storehouse was allocated to the treasury, its granary as an endowment to his father Amin-Ra. His Majesty proceeded to Memphis. He sent to them, saying, Do not close, do not fight, O home of Shu, since the beginning. Let the entrant enter, the goer go. Those who will leave shall not be hindered. I shall offer an oblation to Ptah and the gods of Memphis. I shall sacrifice to Sakar and Shetit. I shall see south of his wall, and I shall sail north in peace. The people of Memphis will be safe and sound. One will not weep over children. Look to the nomes of the south. No one was slain there, except the rebels who had blasphemed God. They closed their fort. They sent out troops against some of his Majesty's troops, consisting of artisans, builders, and sailors who had entered the harbor of Memphis. And the chief of Sais arrived in Memphis by night to charge his soldiers, his sailors, and all the best of his army, consisting 8,000 men, charging them firmly. Memphis is filled with troops of all the best of Lower Kemet, with barley, emmer, and all kinds of grain, the granaries overflowing, with barley, and weapons of war of all kind. A rampart surrounds it. A great battlement has been built, a work of skilled craftsmanship. The river surrounds its east side. One cannot fight there. The stables here are filled with oxen. The storehouse is furnished with everything. silver, gold, copper, clothing, incense, honey, and resin. I shall go to give gifts to the chiefs of Lower Egypt. I shall open their nomes to them. In a few days I shall return. He mounted a horse, for he did not trust his chariot, and he went north in fear of his majesty. At dawn of the next day his majesty arrived at Memphis. When he had moored on its north, he found the water risen to the walls and ships moored at the houses of Memphis. His majesty saw that it was strong. The walls were high with new construction, and the battlements mannered in strength. No way of attacking was found. Every man of his majesty's army had his say about some plan of attack. Every man of his majesty's army said, "Let us blockade, for its troops are numerous." Other men said, "Make a causeway to it so that we may raise the ground to its wall. Let us construct a siege tower, setting up masts and using sails as walls for it. You should divide it thus on each of its sides, with ramparts and a causeway on its north, so as to raise the ground to its wall, so that we find a way for our feet." His majesty raged against them like a panther, saying, "I swear, as Ra loves me, as my father Amen favors me." According to the command of Amen, and the nomes of the south opened to him from afar, though Amen had not put it in their hearts, and they did not know what he had commanded. He, Amen, made him in order to show his might, to let his grandeur be seen. I shall seize it like a cloudburst, for Amen Ra has commanded me. Then he sent his fleet and his troops to attack the harbor of Memphis. They brought him every ship, every ferry, every boat, all the many ships that were moored in the harbor of Memphis with the bow rope fastened to its houses. There was not a common soldier who wept among all the troops of his majesty. His majesty himself came to line up the many ships. His majesty commanded his troops, "Forward against it, mount the walls, enter the houses over the river. When one of you enters the wall, no one shall stand in his vicinity. No troops shall repulse you. To pause is vile. We shall sit down in balance of the two lands." Then Memphis was seized as by a cloudburst. Many people were slain in it or brought as captives to where his majesty was. Now when it dawned on the next day, his majesty sent people into it to protect the temples of the gods. The arm was raised over the Holy of Holies of the gods. Offerings were made to the council of the gods of Memphis. Memphis was cleansed with natron and incense. The priests were set in their places. His majesty proceeded to the house of Ptah. His purification was performed in the robing room. There was performed for him every rite that is performed for a king when he enters the temple. A great offering was made to his father Ptah, south of his wall, of oxen, shorthorns, fowl, and all good things. Then his majesty went to his house. Then all the districts in the region of Memphis heard it. The tower of Bayou, the village of Bayit, they opened the gates and fled in flight, and it was not known where they had gone. Then came King Euput, and the chief of the Ma, Akanash, and Prince Pedisier, and all counts of Lower Kemet, bearing their tribute to see the beauty of his majesty. Then the treasuries and granaries of Memphis were allocated as endowment to Amen, to Ptah, and to the Ennead in Memphis. At the dawn of the next day, his majesty proceeded to the east. An offering was made to Atum in Ker-Aha, the Ennead in Per-Pesjet, and the cavern of the gods in it, consisting of oxen, shorthorns, and fowl, that they might give life, prosperity, and health to the king of Upper and Lower Kemet, Piye, ever living. His Majesty proceeded to own over that mountain of Karaha on the road of Sep to Karaha. His Majesty went to the camp on the west of the Et. His purification was done. He was cleansed in the pool of Kemet. His face was bathed in the river of Nun, in which Ra bathes his face. He proceeded to the high sand in On. A great oblation was made on the high sand in On, before the face of Ra at his rising, consisting of white oxen, milk, myrrh, incense, and all kinds of sweet-smelling plants, going in procession to the temple of Ra. Entering the temple with adorations, the chief lector priest praising God and repulsing the rebels from the king, performed the ritual of the robing room, putting on the sedeb garment, cleansing him with incense and cold water, presenting him the garlands of the Pyramidion house, bringing him the amulets. Mounting the stairs to the great window to view Ra in the Pyramidion house, the king stood by himself alone, breaking the seals of the bolts, opening the doors, viewing his father Ra in the holy Pyramidion house, adorning the morning bark of Ra and the evening bark of Atum. I have inspected the seal. No other king who may arise shall enter here. They placed themselves on their bellies before his Majesty, saying, Abide forever without end, Horus, beloved of On. Entering the temple of Atum, worshipping the image of his father Atum Khepri, great one of On. Then came King Osir Khan to see the beauty of his Majesty. At dawn of the next day, his Majesty proceeded to the harbor at the head of his ships. He crossed over to the harbor of Kemet. The camp of his Majesty was set up on the south of Kahani, in the east of Kemet. Then came those kings and counts of Lower Egypt, all the plume-wearing chiefs, all viziers, chiefs, kings' friends from the west, the east, and the isles in their midst, to see the beauty of his Majesty. Prince Piye threw himself on his belly before his Majesty, saying, Come to Athribis, that you may see Kenti, that Kuyet may protect you, that you may offer an oblation of Horus in his house, of oxen, shorthorns, and fowl. When you enter my house, my treasury will be open to you. I shall present you with my father's possessions. I shall give you gold as much as you wish, turquoise heaped before you, and many horses of the best of the stable, the choicest of the stall. His Majesty proceeded to the house of Horus Kenti. An offering of oxen, shorthorns, and fowl was made to his father Horus Kenti, Lord of Athribis. His Majesty went to the house of the Prince Piye. He presented him with silver, gold, lapis lazuli, and turquoise, a great quantity of everything, and clothing of royal linen of every number, couches laid with fine linen, myrrh and ointment in jars, and stallions and mares, all the best of his stable. He purified himself by a divine oath before these kings and great chiefs of Lower Kemet. Anyone who hides his horses and conceals his wealth shall die the death of his father. I have said this in order that you bear out your servant with all that you know of me. Tell if I have concealed from his Majesty anything of my father's house, gold bars, precious stones, vessels of all kinds, armlets, bracelets of gold, necklaces, collars wrought with precious stones, amulets for every limb, headbands, earrings, all royal adornments, all vessels for the king's purification of gold and precious stones. All these I have presented to the king, and garments of royal linen by the thousands of the very best of my house. I know you will be satisfied with it. Proceed to the stable, choose what you wish, and all the horses you desire." Then His Majesty did just so. The chief of the Ma Tefnakat heard it, and a messenger was sent to where His Majesty was cajoling with words. "We have slain every man we found there." Then His Majesty gave it the town to Prince Piye as a gift. A messenger was sent to where His Majesty was with cajoling words, saying, "Be gracious. I cannot see your face in the days of shame. I cannot stand before your flame. I dread your grandeur, for you are Nubti, foremost of the Southland, and Mont, the mighty bull. Whatever town you turn your face to, you will not be able to find your servant there until I have reached the islands of the sea. For I fear your wrath on account of those fiery words which are hostile to me. Is your Majesty's heart not cooled by the things you did to me? While I am under a just reproach, you did not smite me in accordance with my crime. Weigh in the balance, count by weight, and multiply it against me threefold. But leave the seed, that you may gather it in time. Do not cut down the grove to its roots. Have mercy. Dread of you is in my body. Fear of you is in my bones." I sit not at the beer feast. The harp is not brought for me. I eat the bread of the hungry. I drink the water of the thirsty. Since the day you heard my name, illness is in my bones. My head is bald. My clothes are rags. It is a year that has purged my ka and cleansed your servant of his fault. Let my goods be received into the treasury, gold and all precious stones, the best of the horses and payment of every kind. Send me a messenger quickly to drive the fear from my heart. Let me go to the temple in His presence to cleanse myself by a divine oath." His Majesty sent the chief lector priest Piye as Sedawi and the commander Purim. He, Tefnakat, presented him with silver and gold, clothing and all precious stones. He went to the temple. He praised God. He cleansed himself by a divine oath, saying, "I will not disobey the king's command. I will not thrust aside His Majesty's words. I will not do wrong to account without your knowledge. I will not only do what the king said, I will not disobey what he has commanded." Then His Majesty's heart was satisfied with it. One came to say to His Majesty, "Hut-Sebek has opened its gate. Meten has thrown itself on its belly. No gnome is shut against His Majesty. Of the gnomes of the south and the north, the west, the east, and the islands in the midst are on their bellies in fear of him, and are sending their goods to where His Majesty is, like the subjects of the palace." At dawn of the next day there came the two rulers of Upper Egypt and the two rulers of Lower Egypt, the uraeus wearers, to kiss the ground to the might of His Majesty. Now the kings and counts of Lower Egypt who came to see His Majesty's beauty, their legs were the legs of women. They could not enter the palace because they were uncircumcised and were eaters of fish, which is an abomination to the. But King Namat entered the palace because he was clean and did not eat fish. The three stood there while the one entered the palace. Then the ships were loaded with silver, gold, copper, and clothing, everything of Lower Egypt, every product of Syria, and all plants of God's land. His Majesty sailed south, his heart joyful, and all those nearing him shouting. West and east took up the announcement, shouting around his Majesty. This was their song of jubilation. O mighty ruler, Piye, mighty ruler, you return having taken Lower Kemet. You made bulls into women. Joyful is the mother who bore you, the man who begot you. The valley dwellers worship her, the cow that bore the bull. You are eternal. Your might abides, O ruler, loved of Thebes.